I didn't realize that laugh, the one they threw at something I made, would be the beginning of their downfall. They said it was worthless, said I was embarrassing, said I should be grateful they even put up with me, like I was the problem. What they didn't see was the one detail already slipping: money moving where it shouldn't, quiet enough that only someone paying attention would catch it. I stopped defending myself after that. I started watching, tracking, letting them think I was still small. Then it got bigger than any of us, federal level bigger. At 6:12 a.m., everything caught up to them. By the end of it, one of them was sitting in a cell, still convinced I had overreacted. They thought they were breaking me. They didn't realize they were walking straight into a revenge I had already set in motion. Chapter 1. I was standing in the middle of the dining room at Blackwood Ridge Club, holding a quilt I had spent 6 months making, and I felt the shift before anyone said a word. It never starts loud. It starts in the space between conversations, the way voices soften just a little, the way eyes flick toward you and then away, like they touched something they were not expecting to find. The chandelier above me cast a warm gold light across the room, the kind that makes everything look more expensive than it really is. It caught on the fabric in my hands, pulling quiet color out of each square. A faded blue from a dress Leela wore when she was 10, a strip from the blouse I used to wear to work when I still believed effort alone could change where we ended up, a small piece from the curtains in our first apartment, the one where the heat barely worked in winter and we learned how to live anyway. I brought it because I thought it meant something. That was my first mistake. Leela stood a few feet away from me, her posture straight, her shoulders relaxed in a way that takes practice. She looked like she belonged there, not just dressed for it, but shaped by it, like the room had already decided she was part of it. When she looked at me, there was a moment, just a second, where something softer showed through, something familiar. Then her mother-in-law leaned in. Victoria Hale did not need volume. She had the kind of presence that made people listen even when they pretended not to. She tilted her head slightly, studying the quilt in my hands with a kind of polite curiosity that never means anything good. "This looks homemade." She said it gently, almost like a compliment, but it landed exactly where she wanted it to. A couple of people at the table let out small laughs, quick and controlled, the kind that gives permission for others to join in. Someone across the room turned to look, then another. It spread without effort, just enough to make sure I could feel it from every direction. I did not look at her. I looked at my daughter. Leela did not hesitate. "Mom, this is not really appropriate here." Her voice was low, careful, practiced. That careful tone told me more than the words did. It meant she had already thought about this, already decided what she would do if I crossed some invisible line she could see and I could not. The room shifted around us. Not silence, not exactly, just attention. People love moments like this. They love watching someone realize where they stand without anyone having to say it out loud. I felt the weight of the quilt in my hands, heavier than it had been when I walked in. 6 months of evenings, 6 months of choosing this over sleep, over rest, over anything else I might have needed. I nodded once. That was all I gave them. I set the quilt down on the table and smoothed the edge without thinking, pressing the fabric flat the same way I had done night after night while making it. My hands stayed steady. That surprised me. No one spoke to me after that. They did not have to. When you spend enough time in rooms that were not built for you, you learn something early. People do not always push you out. Sometimes they just step back and let you understand it on your own. I felt their eyes, not just judgment, curiosity, a quiet kind of satisfaction, like something had just confirmed what they always believed, that someone like me could only come so far. I let my gaze move slowly across the room, the artwork on the walls, expensive and forgettable, the bar in the corner staffed by men who never looked up unless called, the servers moving in clean, quiet patterns, trained to exist only when needed, a private hallway near the back, half hidden unless you knew what to look for. I notice things. I always have. It's what you do when you don't have power. You learn the shape of it instead. I stayed there a few seconds longer than I needed to, long enough to feel the room settle again, long enough to understand exactly how it worked. Then I turned. Leela did not call my name. She did not reach for me or take a step in my direction. She simply turned back to the table, back to her glass, back to the version of her life that did not include me in it. That part landed clean. I walked toward the exit, my steps steady, not rushed, not slow. My heels made a soft sound against the floor, the kind that disappears if no one is listening for it. Behind me, the laughter started again, easier this time. That was worse. By the time I reached the doors, the moment had already become something small to them, something they would fold into conversation later if they needed it. I pushed the doors open and stepped outside. The air was cooler, quieter, real in a way the room had not been. I stood there for a second, my hand still on the door, and let the truth settle in. People do not respect effort, they respect position, and the moment they decide you don't have it, nothing you made with your hands will ever be enough to change their mind. That was the moment it became clear. Respect is not given, it's taken. I stepped away from the entrance and walked toward the parking lot, the gravel shifting under my shoes. The building behind me stood lit against the dark, polished and certain of itself, like it never once questioned who it belonged to. Halfway to my car, I stopped and looked back, not at the people, at the building, the structure, the land, the way everything connected without asking permission from anyone. I let my eyes trace it slowly, committing it to memory, because I don't forget things like that. I got into my car and closed the door, the silence settling around me in a way that felt clean. For a moment, I sat there with my hands on the wheel, breathing steady, letting everything that just happened fall into place. I did not leave that room because I was hurt. I left because I was done asking anyone in it for permission to exist. I started the engine. They thought they had just embarrassed a woman who didn't belong in that room. They didn't realize they were walking straight into a revenge I had already set in motion. Chapter 2. The drive back felt longer than it should have, even though the roads were familiar enough that I could have taken them blind. Queens had not changed much. The same narrow streets, the same tired storefronts, the same flicker of neon that never quite worked right. I pulled up in front of the house and sat there for a minute with the engine running, watching the porch light that I used to leave on for Megan when she came home late from school events or part-time shifts. I turned the key and everything went quiet. Inside, the air smelled the same. Fabric softener, old wood, something faintly metallic from years of sewing needles and machine oil. I set my purse down on the kitchen table and ran my hand along the surface. The scratch near the edge was still there. Megan had made that when she was 10, dragging a chair across too fast and then bursting into tears because she thought I would be mad. I was never mad at her. I walked over to the counter and saw the old sewing machine, still covered with the same cloth I had used for years. I pulled it back and sat down, pressing my fingers lightly against the metal. I could almost hear it again, the steady rhythm late into the night while the rest of the block slept. There were nights I worked 2 jobs and still came home to sew until 2 in the morning. There were mornings I barely slept, just enough to get up and pack her lunch before school. She never complained. She wore hand-me-downs without a word, smiling like it did not matter. I remember once she looked at herself in the mirror in a dress I had altered 3 times already and said it still looked new. She said it like she believed it. I believed her. I opened the drawer near the sink and found a stack of old bills, neatly tied together. Electric, rent, grocery lists scribbled on the back of envelopes. Every dollar had been counted. Every choice had been weighed. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes for a moment. Then I saw her face again. Not the little girl in the mirror, not the one who smiled in secondhand clothes, but the woman from last night, standing under perfect lighting, surrounded by people who had never worried about a bill in their lives. Her posture was different. Her voice was softer, but not in a way I recognized. There was a moment I could not stop replaying. She had looked at me, just for a second, and then looked away. Not quickly, not by accident. It was measured, intentional. I heard her voice again in my head, low and careful, telling someone beside her that I was just someone from the neighborhood. She had laughed after that. A small laugh, like it meant nothing. That laugh stayed with me more than anything else. I reached for my phone on the table. Her name was still at the top of my messages. I opened the thread and read the last thing she had sent. Are you home safe? No apology, no explanation. Just that. My thumb hovered over the screen. For a second, I almost typed something back. Something simple, something easy. I could have said yes. I could have pretended none of it mattered. Instead, I locked the phone and set it down. The silence that followed felt different. Not heavy, not sad. Clear. I stood up and walked to the far side of the kitchen, opening the bottom drawer that most people would not notice. It stuck a little before giving way. Inside, beneath a folded tablecloth, was a thin stack of documents. I pulled them out and placed them on the table. Marrow Holdings, LLC. The name had not been spoken in years, but it had never stopped existing. The pages were clean, organized, everything exactly where it needed to be. Contracts, ownership records, signatures that had been placed carefully, deliberately. I flipped through them slowly. People like to believe that if something is quiet, it is small, that if it is not talked about, it does not matter. They are wrong. Marrow Holdings did not just exist, it held controlling stakes in places people like them built their lives around. My phone buzzed against the table. I glanced at the screen and saw a name I had not needed to save. Daniel Reeves. I let it ring once more before answering. I was beginning to wonder if you would call, he said, his voice steady as always. I was already home, I replied. A pause on the other end, brief but noticeable. Did anything change? He asked. I looked down at the papers spread out in front of me, then toward the window where the street outside looked exactly as it always had. Yes, I said. Another pause, longer this time. Understood, he said. Do you want to move forward now, or do you want to wait? I ran my finger along the edge of the top document, feeling the slight texture of the paper. They made it simple for me, I said. That almost sounded like amusement in his voice when he responded. Then we proceed as planned, he said. I will prepare the next step. No, I said quietly. You already did. He knew exactly what I meant. Then I will be ready when you are, he said. I ended the call and set the phone down again. For a long moment, I just stood there, looking at everything in front of me. The old kitchen, the worn table, the machine that had carried us through years that most people would not understand. Nothing about this place was impressive. Nothing about it was meant to be. But every inch of it had been built on choices, careful ones, patient ones. I gathered the documents into a neat stack and slid them back into the drawer, leaving it slightly open this time. Then I turned off the kitchen light and headed toward the hallway. As I passed the mirror by the door, I caught my reflection and stopped. The woman looking back at me did not look tired anymore. She did not look hurt. She did not look like someone waiting to be understood. She looked like someone who had already made a decision and simply hadn't said it out loud yet. I reached for my coat and stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind me without hesitation. This time, I did not leave the porch light on. I did not plan to come back the same woman. Chapter 3. Something in me had already shifted, and by the time the sun came up, I was no longer sitting with the feeling. I was working. I made coffee not because I wanted it, but because I needed my hands steady. Then I sat by the window with my phone and a blank legal pad, writing one name at the top: Bradley Caldwell. It looked clean. It was supposed to. I stared at it for a moment, then picked up my phone and called Marcus. He answered on the first ring this time. "I had a feeling," he said. "You always do." "What do you need?" "I need you to look at Bradley Caldwell. Everything. I do not want a summary. I want what people miss." There was a short pause. "You think there is something there?" "I know there is." Keys started clicking on his end. "Give me a few hours," he said. "I am not in a hurry," I replied. "You never are." We hung up, and I sat there, listening to the quiet of the house. It did not feel empty anymore. It felt focused. By early afternoon, Marcus called back. "I sent you the file," he said. I opened it as he spoke. At first glance, it looked exactly like it should. Structured funds, clean branding, targeted portfolios. The kind of language that made people feel safe without understanding why. "He positions himself around retirement money," Marcus said. "Older clients, people who spent their whole lives saving and do not want to risk it at the end." I scrolled. "He sells stability," I said. "He sells trust," Marcus corrected. There were layers beneath the surface. Funds tied to other entities, those entities tied to others. Names that meant nothing until you started lining them up. "Some of these filings are incomplete," I said. "They're incomplete on purpose." I kept reading, slower now. "Look at page 9, Marcus added. I did. A transaction log, partial, with one entry standing out. A large movement, then a correction, then a deletion. "This one was pulled," I said. "Almost," he replied. "It was still sitting in a backup record. Most people would not know to look there." "Where did it go?" "Through 2 shells, then offshore," he said. "Cayman, most likely." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. That was the first real break. Not suspicion, direction. "This is not just mismanagement," I said. "No," Marcus agreed. "It's controlled." I went back to the file, deeper this time. "Page 12, he said. I already knew what I was about to see would matter. Helen Brooks, 72, widow, 38 years working the same job. Every raise, every bonus, every careful decision turned into a modest retirement fund. Then Bradley. He moved almost everything," I said quietly. "With her consent," said Marcus. "With her trust." I kept reading. There was a note attached, a follow-up call, a delay, another explanation, another delay. "She tried to get her money back," I said. "She did. By the time it was processed, there was nothing worth returning." I stared at the screen. "Where is she now?" "Still in her house," he said. "For now. She listed it last month." That landed harder than anything else. "Does her family know?" "Doesn't look like it." I closed the file halfway, just enough to break the line of sight. This was never going to stay small. "Do you see fraud?" I asked. "I see insurance misrepresentation, potential securities violations, and enough layering to suggest intent, but no one has pushed it far enough. I will. I know." We ended the call, but the silence that followed felt heavier this time. Not emotional, measured. By evening, another pattern started to shake tape. Megan. I had not been looking at her directly. I didn't need to. The details had already been there. A question she asked Bradley that he answered too quickly. A conversation that stopped when she walked in. A call he ended the moment she looked at him. At the time, it passed as nothing. Now, it did not. I picked up my phone again and opened our messages. There were small pauses in her words, things she started and never finished. That wasn't confidence. That was hesitation. Denial doesn't come from ignorance. It comes from knowing just enough to be afraid. I could almost hear her voice in my head, quieter than before, careful with what she chose to say and what she left out. I imagined her sitting across from him. She might have asked, "You said everything was transparent." "It is," he would say, without looking up. Then why did that transaction disappear? A pause. It was corrected. And the call you ended earlier? Work. Always simple. Always just enough. Not enough to prove anything. Enough to keep her from asking again. I set the phone down slowly. She was already in it. Whether she understood that or not didn't change what came next. I walked back into the kitchen and pulled the drawer open. The documents were exactly where I left them. Marrow Holdings. Bradley had built his world on the assumption that no one would trace it far enough. He had no idea how far I was willing to go. My phone buzzed again. Daniel. I answered immediately. I reviewed what Marcus sent. And, I asked, there was no hesitation. They have enough to move, he said. Chapter 4. The room had not changed, but the balance inside it had. I stepped through the entrance without slowing, the sound of heels on polished floor steady and deliberate. Conversations carried on around me, soft laughter, the quiet clink of glasses, the same carefully curated ease I had seen before. Only this time, I was not part of the background. The young man at the front desk looked up and froze for a moment before straightening. "Good evening, ma'am." There was something different in his voice now, not recognition, awareness. I gave a small nod and kept walking. A few heads turned, not many at first, just enough to feel the shift begin. I did not acknowledge it. I let it build on its own. I did not look toward the dining area. I walked past it, straight toward the back corridor. A woman in a dark suit stepped into my path, then quickly stepped aside. "Ma'am, we have been preparing." Her tone was careful. "Good," I said. She fell in step half a pace behind me. "Everything is ready." I stopped just before the double doors leading to the private offices. "Clear the floor near the main room," I said quietly. "Keep service running, but I do not want anyone in the center." She nodded immediately. "Yes, ma'am." That was enough. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The general manager stood as soon as he saw me. "Miss Carter." "Status," I said. "All documentation is confirmed. Marrow Holdings is listed as controlling owner across all relevant entities, including this property." I let that settle for a second. "Good," I said. "No announcements." "Understood." "And security?" "In place." "And when they arrive?" He met my gaze. "We follow your lead." I turned and walked back out. By the time I stepped into the main room again, the shift had started to spread. It moved slowly at first, like a change in temperature people could feel but not explain. Then I saw them. Megan stood near the center, her shoulders tight, her smile thinner than before. Beside her, Daniel Whitaker stood with the same easy confidence, speaking to a small group like nothing in the world could touch him. Megan saw me first. Her expression broke before she could stop it. "Mom," she said under her breath. Daniel turned. For a second, his face stayed composed, then something flickered. Not recognition, instinct. I walked toward them, each step measured. "You came back," Megan said. "I did." Daniel shifted slightly, positioning himself just enough to reassert control. "Is there something we can help you with?" he asked. His tone was smooth, careful. I looked at him. "No," I said, "but there is something you need to see." Before he could respond, the sound at the entrance cut through the room. It was not loud, but it was different. People turned. Conversations stalled. The quiet ripple spread outward as two uniformed officers stepped inside, followed by a third, then a man in a dark suit carrying a folder. The room held its breath. Daniel's posture stiffened. "What is this?" he said, his voice low. No one answered him. The man in the suit approached directly. "Daniel Whitaker." The name sounded different now. "I need you to come with us." A few people nearby shifted, stepping back just enough to create space. Daniel let out a short, controlled laugh. "There's a mistake." "There is not," the officer said. Megan's hand moved toward him. "Daniel," she whispered. He glanced at her, then back at the officers. "This is a misunderstanding. I can clear this up in 5 minutes." The man opened the folder. "Warrant for arrest. Charges include financial fraud, insurance misrepresentation, and securities violations." The words landed hard. Daniel's composure cracked. "This is not the place for this," he said, sharper now. "Do you know who I am?" One of the officers stepped closer. "We do." Hands moved in, controlled and precise. Daniel pulled back slightly. "Wait," he said, louder now. "You cannot do this in front of everyone." The cuffs clicked into place. The sound cut through everything. Gasps followed. Someone near the bar turned fully, staring. Another guest lifted their phone, then lowered it, unsure. Daniel looked around, searching for something to hold on to. "There are people here who know me," he said. "This is going to be handled properly." "It is," the officer replied. Daniel's voice rose, just enough to break. "This is not over." "No," I said quietly. "It is not." Megan stepped back, her eyes wide, her breath uneven. "Mom," she said, her voice shaking, "tell me what is happening." I looked at her, not past her, at her. "This is real," she said almost to herself. "This is actually real." Daniel was already being led away, his presence shrinking with every step, the confidence that filled the room earlier dissolving into something smaller, something exposed. Megan's voice broke. "I didn't know," she said. That was the first honest thing she had said. I held her gaze. "You chose to be proud of." The words stayed between us. She flinched. Around us, the room had fully shifted. Conversations were gone. People were watching openly now, not hiding it, not pretending. This was no longer their space. It had never been. Megan shook her head slightly. "I thought—" She stopped. I waited. "I thought this was what mattered." I nodded once. "You chose what to be proud of." Her shoulders dropped, the weight of it settling in. I turned away before she could say anything else. There was nothing left to explain. As I walked toward the exit, the staff moved without being asked. Doors opened, paths cleared. The same space that once looked past me now adjusted around me without hesitation. Outside, the night air felt different, still, controlled. I stepped forward without looking back. They had built everything on appearance. I built everything on truth. Only one of those survives when the lights come on. Chapter 5. I did not feel relief when it ended. What settled in was quieter than that, something heavier, the kind of silence that stays after the noise has already done its damage. The charges against Daniel Whitmore moved forward without spectacle. Fraud, misappropriation, coordinated deception, all laid out in language that left no room to hide. His accounts were frozen, the firm unraveled faster than anyone expected. Clients who had trusted him began the slow process of getting something back. Not everything, never everything, but enough to prove it had been real. There were hearings, statements, numbers attached to losses that once felt abstract. People stood up and spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, just plainly. That was enough. Consequences do not need volume to matter. I watched it from a distance. Lauren did not have that option. Her name was not on the charges, but it followed her anyway. It showed up in the way people paused when they saw her, in conversations that ended a little too quickly, in invitations that stopped coming without explanation. There was no single moment where it collapsed. It was slower, more complete than that. She left Manhattan quietly. Back in Queens, the streets felt the same, which made everything else harder to ignore. Familiar places have a way of stripping away whatever story you have been telling yourself. I heard she stood outside her mother's door for a long time before knocking, long enough to reconsider, long enough to leave. Evelyn opened the door. She did not reach for her. She did not turn away either. There was just a pause, something steady and unreadable. Lauren stepped inside anyway. No one said what should have been said. Not then, maybe not ever. Some things sit between people whether they name them or not. Forgiveness, if it comes, does not fix what happened. It only makes space for what comes next. Whether you deserve that space is a different question. They moved around each other carefully at first. Conversations stayed small, practical. It was not reconciliation, not yet. It was something quieter, something that asked for patience instead of certainty. Lauren found work where she could, a small nonprofit helping people recover from financial damage. It was not the kind of place she would have noticed before. Most of it was listening, paperwork, explaining options that never sounded as hopeful as people wanted them to be. She stopped using her last name. It did not always matter. Some people recognized her anyway. You could see it in their eyes, the moment they placed her, the brief shift in how they spoke to her after that. She did not correct them, she did not explain. She stayed where she was and finished what she had started. That was new. The Ashford Ridge Club did not survive what came out. For years, it had been a place defined by who belonged and who did not, a quiet kind of separation that no one questioned if they benefited from it. It was sold. Now it is Hollowell Commons, 96 apartments where the gates used to be. The entrance is open. People come and go without needing to prove anything about themselves first. I drove past once. That was enough. Some changes speak for themselves. Time kept moving. Lauren had a daughter, Rose. The name felt simple, like something chosen without needing to be explained. Evelyn brought out the quilt she had made years ago, the same one that had once been dismissed, set aside like it did not carry any weight. This time it was different. Lauren held it carefully, her fingers tracing the stitching as if she was seeing it for the first time. The room stayed quiet. No one rushed to fill it. She started to cry, not the kind that looks for comfort, just something that needed to come out. She held it like something she was still learning how to deserve. No one told her that she did. They didn't need to. There's a difference between being given another chance and becoming someone who can carry it without breaking it again. One happens quickly. The other takes longer than most people expect. She did not rush it. Days became routines, work, home, small moments that did not look like progress from the outside. Some days were easier, others were not. There were still looks she recognized, still moments where the past showed up without warning. She did not turn away from them. Sometimes the people she helped reminded her too much of what happened, of how easy it had been to ignore certain things when it benefited her. She did not look for a way around that feeling. She let it stay long enough to understand it. Then she kept going. There was no point where everything balanced out, no moment where it all felt settled, just the quiet proof of effort, repeated often enough that it started to mean something. I did not go back to see her. Not everything needs to be revisited to be finished. Some things end exactly where they should. Truth does not need to fight to be seen. It just needs to last. And it does. If being accepted meant staying silent and living a lie, would you still choose it? Or would you risk losing everything just to keep your truth? If this story meant something to you, stay with me, share your thoughts below, and follow along for more stories that might feel a little closer to your own.